Shalom Aleichem, Mishnah Yomi. Today is in chapter 6 of Bava Kama, Mishnah Vav, continuing the halacha, the laws of Aish, fire-related damage. Gates is a spark, and nitzites. Sheyotza mitachat the potish v'hizik. It went out from under the hammer, meaning a blacksmith struck an anvil or some sort of metal, or they're welding in the auto shop, something with sparks involved, and it caused damage. It lit something on fire, for instance. Chayev, the one who made the spark, has to pay. People who are engaged in professions that are generating sparks or the potential to create fire have to take precautions, such as we mentioned a stone wall yesterday, or distancing this avoda, this malacha, from flammable objects. The Mishnah adds, Gomel shayatayun pishtan. There was a camel that was heavily laden with flax. Now, flax is highly flammable. The avar b'shuz rabim, it's going through the public street. V'nichnas pishtanu l'toch chanut. And there's so much flax piled on top of this gamal that is coming off the sides, and it's going into the windows. Remember, in those days, there's usually not glass or anything in the windows, so some of the burden on this camel is entering the windows of a store. V'dalku b'neru shel chenvoni, and it gets lit on fire from the candles or the lamps of the storekeeper inside the store. And then, of course, the camel gets scared because there's a fire on his back, and he runs. V'hidlik at the bira, and then he runs towards a large building, a mansion, and that catches on fire as well. So bala gomel chayev, the owner of the camel, is the one liable for the damage here. He overloaded the camel in a way where flammable items would be sticking off the sides of the camel into the flow of traffic and into potentially flammable fire sources that are next to the Rishus Harabim. But here's another case. If the shopkeeper had put his candles, his lamps, on the outside of the store, basically on the sidewalk instead of indoors, then it's not the camel loader's fault that the pishtan, that the flax caught fire. It's the storekeeper. He should have kept his lamps inside. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, you're going to love this, B'ner Chanukah Pater. If it was his Chanukah menorah that lit the flax on the gamal that ran away and burned the house, he had permission. He has permission to put his menorah outside. He would be pater, and everyone should, on Hanukkah, expect that there should be menorot outside. Now, if you go to Eretz Yisrael today, many people are following the opinion that, yes, it's ideal to put your menorah outside. They typically have it in a clear box so the wind does not blow out the candles. In America, more typically, it's done in the window. So if you're ever in Eretz Yisrael for Hanukkah, it's a big zechut to see the amazing show in the windows and outdoors, and it's really an amazing thing. And you'll think of this Mishnah, Bava Kama, chapter 6, Mishnah 6. And it is interesting, there's not a lot of mention of Hanukkah in the Mishnayot, in Torah Shabbat, in Scripture at all, really, because it was the last holiday. It came well after all the holidays, well after Purim. Now, Purim has a whole Masechta Megillah that we learned through. There's detailed halacha about Purim, but about Hanukkah, really there's not a lot mentioned. So again, because it was the last holiday after Nevi'im, after prophecy, after Scripture, and also because everyone loved Hanukkah. Everyone was so familiar with Hanukkah. It was Chavivin Mitzvah Mayot. It was a very beloved mitzvah, and it was Persume Nisa. Everyone was talking about it. Everyone knew about it. There was, I think, in my opinion, less of a need to have a Mishnayos Hanukkah. So Baruch Hashem, we're Zochei to finish chapter 6, on to chapter 7. Meruba, it's greater, Midat Tashlumi Kaifel, the measure, the law of paying back double, Midat Tashlumi Arba Chamisha, from the measure, the situations where one might have to pay back 4 or 5 times. Now, we've moved on to the topic of stealing. And when someone steals, they must not only return the item, but make an additional restitution of the cash value. The Mishnah continues, Shemidot Tashlumi Kaifel, that this measure of paying back double, kefil is lashon doubled. It's like covered, it's wrapped up, it's double. No heget bein b'davar sheyesh b'rachaim. It applies with things that don't have a spirit, are not alive. Uvein b'davar sheyein lo b'rachaim. So it applies both things that are alive and things that are not alive. So basically, anything could be covered under the law of tashlume kefil, of the doubled penalty payment. But the scope of the law of paying back 4 or 5 times, this only applies to a shore, an ox, and a say. Now, a say can mean, basically, it usually means a shepsula, a small sheep. It could mean a small sheep or a small goat. as we have by Pesach, the carbon Pesach, could be a 1-year-old sheep or goat, so seh could apply to either. And we'll actually explain this tomorrow, what this 4 or 5 payment is for an ox or a seh. Shneamar, because the pasuk says, Ki yignov ish shor seh, tvachu mecharo, etc. If a man will steal an ox or a seh and he slaughters it or sells it, that's when he's liable 4 or 5 times. That is in Shemot, Exodus chapter 21, verse 37. So that's a very specific case. But in general, theft is covered under Teshumei Kefil. The thief has to return the item and pay back the value. If the item is gone, we'll see he has to return double the value. The Mishnah goes on, Eina gonev achar gonov mishalem Teshumei Kefil. A thief who steals from a thief does not pay tashlumei kefil. And to steal a phrase, there's no honor among thieves. So it could happen that a thief would be stealing from his fellow thief who stole it from the original owner. V'lo toveach, not the slaughterer, v'lo mocher, or the seller, achar gonov, mishalem tashlumei arba'a v'chamisha. And somebody else who either slaughters an animal or resells an animal who's not the thief, they're not going to be on the hook for 4 or 5. Again, we'll talk about the Arba Chamisha, the 4 or 5 again in more detail tomorrow. What's going on here is a thief stole an ox. So really, he should pay back 5 times, as we'll learn, but then he gave it to someone else who now slaughters it or resells it. So that second person who's not the thief is not on the hook for the 4 or 5 times. Tizkul mitzvot, be well.